Alright, so welcome to lesson 9E in our series of adding and subtracting decimals. So this time we're going to be talking about something that's missing. So before we get started into looking at some of those things that are missing and seeing what we can do about it, let's go through and let's kind of review some of the things that we've already talked about. Well, right now we're looking at this hundredths grid right here and this tenths grid right here. Well, if we look at this hundredths grid, and we know that this is 10 hundredths. And we know that this is 1/10. Well, the thing that we've talked about, one of the things that y'all have had the opportunity to discover, is that 10 hundredths, either written as a fraction, is equivalent to 1/10. And that, even if we write it as a decimal, it's the same as 0.01. The reason why, for every 1/10, comma, there are 10 hundredths. And so remember, that's always very important information. So if we go over here and we look at this next one, well, right here we have 30 hundredths, or, oops, let me move that or a little bit more towards the middle, or 3/10. Remember that both of those are equivalent, that they're the same thing, and remember that for every 1/10 there are 10 hundredths, so for every 3/10 there are 30 hundredths. So now that we've kind of got that established, there's some of that information from fractions to decimals and decimals back to fraction and equivalent tenths and hundreds. And if you need to go back and review those lessons, please go back and do so. So let's look at our first example. I'm going to switch my color to a little yellow here, and I have 3 6/10 minus 2 14 hundredths. Well, we set this up like we normally would set up a subtraction problem in a vertical format. You know, the first thing we always do is we bring our decimal point down to keep everything lined up. So when we look at here, we say, well, there's something missing right here. We can't subtract that because there's no digit in the hundredths place. Well, from what we know is that this 3 6/10 can also be the same as 3 60 hundredths. So we can put a 0 right there because that number is still going to be represent the same amount. So now we can go through and we can start subtracting. Remember, before I start subtracting, I do all of my regrouping first, then I start subtracting. So I can't take 4 hundredths away from 0 hundredths. So I go here and regroup. This is 5. This is now 10. Now I can subtract, so I box that. I can subtract here, and there's nothing for me to regroup here. So 6, 4, 1 46 hundredths. The next thing I do is I go and check it. 2 14 hundredths plus 1 46 hundredths. Add those up. 0, regroup, box it, 6. Oops, I forgot to bring my decimal point down at first. 3. Put my Super Gucci sign right there. And knowing that, yes, that indeed is the correct difference between 3 6/10 and 2 14 hundredths. So now let's look at one last example. So now we have the example of 8 63 hundredths minus 7 2/10. So we set this up, go back to yellow again. 8 63 hundredths, 7 2/10. Same thing. Oh man, we have something missing. Remember that 7 2/10 can also be represented as 7 20 hundredths. So we can put that 0 right there. Make sure we have our placeholder, and now we can start subtracting. I look across my subtraction problem. I don't have to do any regrouping, so I start subtracting. Bring down my decimal point. 3, 4, so 1 and 43 hundredths. So I go through, I check it. 1 and 43 hundredths plus 7 and 2 tenths, or 7 and 20 hundredths. Bring my decimal point down, and now I start adding to check my work. 3, 6, 8. Super Gucci sign, and that indeed does check. And so now here are some practice problems for you to work out. And that is the end of our lesson.